This is Audible.
Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Airport by Arthur Hailey, narrated by B.J. Harrison. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. From High Flight by John Gillespie McGee, Jr., sometime Flight Lieutenant, Royal Canadian Air Force. Part 1, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. 1. At 6:30 on a Friday evening in January, Lincoln International Airport, Illinois, was functioning, though with difficulty. The airport was reeling, as was the entire Midwestern United States, from the meanest, roughest winter storm in half a dozen years. The storm had lasted 3 days. Now, like pustules on a battered, weakened body, trouble spots were erupting steadily. A United Airlines food truck, loaded with 200 dinners, was lost and presumably snowbound somewhere on the airport perimeter. A search for the truck, in driving snow and darkness, had so far failed to locate either the missing vehicle or its driver. United's Flight 111, a non-stop DC-8 for Los Angeles, which the food truck was to service, was already several hours behind schedule. The food snafu would make it later still. Similar delays, for varying reasons, were affecting at least 100 flights of 20 other airlines using Lincoln International. Out on the airfield, runway 30 was out of use, blocked by an Aéreo Mexican jet, a Boeing 707, its wheels deeply mired in waterlogged ground beneath snow near the runway's edge. 2 hours of intensive effort had failed to get the big jet moved. Now, Aéreo Mexican, having exhausted its own local resources, had appealed to TWA for help. Air traffic control, hampered by the loss of runway 30, had instituted flow control procedures, limiting the volume of incoming traffic from adjoining air route centers at Minneapolis, Cleveland, Kansas City, Indianapolis, and Denver. Despite this, 20 incoming flights were stacked up overhead, orbiting, some nearing low fuel limits. On the ground, twice that number were readying for takeoff. But until the backlog of flights in the air could be reduced, ATC had ordered further delays of outbound traffic. Meanwhile, terminal gates, taxiways, and ground holding areas were increasingly crammed with waiting aircraft, many with engines running. Air freight warehouses of all airlines were stacked to their palletized limits with shipments, their usual high-speed transit impeded by the storm. Freight supervisors were nervously watching perishables, hothouse flowers from Wyoming for New England, a ton of Pennsylvania cheese for Anchorage, Alaska, frozen peas for Iceland, live lobsters, transshipped from the east for a polar route flight, destination Europe. The lobsters were for tomorrow's menus in Edinburgh and Paris, where they would be billed as fresh local seafood, and American tourists would order them unknowingly. Storm or not, contracts decreed that air freight perishables must arrive at destination fresh and swiftly. Causing special anxiety in American Airlines freight was a shipment of several thousand turkey poults, hatched in incubators only hours earlier. The precise hatching shipping schedule, like a complex order of battle, was set up weeks ago, before the turkey eggs were laid. It called for delivery of the live birds on the West Coast within 48 hours of birth, the limit of the tiny creature's existence without their first food or water. Normally, the arrangement provided a near 100% survival. Significant also, if the poults were fed en route, they would stink, and so would the airplane conveying them for days afterward. Already the Polt's schedule was out of joint by several hours. But an airplane had been diverted from passenger to freight service, and tonight the fledgling turkeys would have priority over everything else traveling, human VIPs included. In the main passenger terminal, chaos predominated. Terminal waiting areas were jammed with thousands of passengers from delayed or canceled flights. Baggage in piles was everywhere. The vast main concourse had the combined appearance of a football scrimmage and Christmas Eve at Macy's. High on the terminal roof, the airport's immodest slogan, "Lincoln International, Aviation Crossroads of the World," was entirely obscured by drifting snow. The wonder was, Mel Bakersfeld reflected, that anything was continuing to operate at all. Mel, airport general manager, lean, rangy, and a powerhouse of disciplined energy, was standing by the snow control desk, high in the control tower. He peered out into the darkness. Normally, from this glass-walled room, the entire airport complex, runways, taxi strips, terminals, traffic of the ground and air, was visible like neatly aligned building blocks and models, even at night, their shapes and movements well defined by the lights. Only one loftier view existed, that of air traffic control, which occupied the 2 floors above. But tonight, only a faint blur of a few nearer lights penetrated the almost opaque curtain of wind-driven snow. Mel suspected this would be a winter to be discussed at meteorologists' conventions for years to come. The present storm had been born 5 days ago in the lee of the Colorado Mountains. At birth, it was a tiny low-pressure area, no bigger than a foothills homestead, and most forecasters on their air route weather charts had either failed to notice or ignored it. As if in resentment, the low-pressure system thereupon inflated like a giant malignancy, and still growing, swung first southeast, then north. It crossed Kansas and Oklahoma, then paused at Arkansas, gathering assorted nastiness. Next day, fat and monstrous, it rumbled up the Mississippi Valley. Finally, over Illinois, the storm unloaded, almost paralyzing the state with blizzard winds, freezing temperatures, and a 10-inch snowfall in 24 hours. At the airport, the 10-inch snow had been preceded by a continuous, if somewhat lighter, fall. Now it was being followed by more snow, whipped by vicious winds which piled new drifts, at the same time that plows were clearing the old. Maintenance snow crews were nearing exhaustion. Within the past few hours, several men had been ordered home, over-fatigued despite their intermittent use of sleeping quarters provided at the airport for just this kind of emergency. At the snow control desk near Mel, Danny Farrow, at other times an assistant airport manager, now snow shift supervisor, was calling maintenance snow center by radiophone. "We're losing the parking lots. I need 6 more payloaders and a banjo team at Y-74. Danny was seated at the snow desk, which was not really a desk at all, but a wide 3-position console. Confronting Danny and his 2 assistants, one on either side, was a battery of telephones, tel-autographs, and radios. Surrounding them were maps, charts, and bulletin boards recording the state and location of every piece of motorized snow-fighting equipment, as well as men and supervisors. There was a separate board for banjo teams, roving crews with individual snow shovels. The snow desk was activated only for its one seasonal purpose. At other times of the year, this room remained empty and silent. Danny's bald pate showed sweat globules as he scratched notations on a large-scale airport grid map. He repeated his message to maintenance, making it sound like a desperate personal plea, which perhaps it was. Up here was the snow clearance command post, Whoever ran it was supposed to view the airport as a whole, juggling demands and deploying equipment wherever need seemed greatest. A problem, though, and undoubtedly a cause of Danny's sweating, was that those down below, fighting to keep their own operations going, seldom shared the same view of priorities. Sure. 6 more payloaders. An edgy voice from maintenance, which was on the opposite side of the airfield, rattled the speakerphone. We'll get him from Santa Claus. He ought to be around in this lot. A pause, then more aggressively. Any other damn fool stupid notions? Glancing at Danny, Mel shook his head. He recognized the speakerphone voice as belonging to a senior foreman who had probably worked continuously since the present snowfall started. Tempers wore thin at times like this, with good reason. Usually, after an arduous, snow-fighting winter, airport maintenance and management had an evening stag session together, which they called kiss-and-make-up night. They would certainly need one this year. Danny said reasonably, "We sent 4 payloaders after that United food truck. They should be through, or almost." "They might be, if we could find the frigging truck." "You haven't located it yet? What are you guys doing? Having a supper and ladies' night?" Danny reached out, turning down the speakerphone volume as a reply slammed back. "Listen, do you birds in that crummy penthouse have any idea what it's like out in the field? Maybe you should look out the windows once in a while. Anyone could be at the goddamn North Pole tonight and never know the difference." "Try blowing on your hands, Ernie," Danny said. "It may keep 'em warm, and it'll stop you sounding off." Mentally, Mel Bakersfeld filtered out most of the exchange, though he was aware that what had been said about conditions away from the terminal was true. An hour ago, Mel had driven across the airfield. He used service roads, but although he knew the airport layout intimately, tonight he had trouble finding his way, and several times came close to being lost. Mel had gone to inspect the maintenance snow center, and then, as now, activity had been intensive. Where the tower snow control desk was a command post, the maintenance snow center was a frontline headquarters. From here, weary crews and supervisors came and went, alternately sweating and freezing, the ranks of regular workers swelled by auxiliaries, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, clerks, police. The auxiliaries were pulled from their regular airport duties and paid time and a half until the snow emergency was over. But they knew what was expected, having rehearsed snow maneuvers, like weekend soldiers, on runways and taxi strips during summer and fall. It sometimes amused outsiders to see snow removal groups, plow blades down, blowers roaring, on a hot sunny day. But if any expressed surprise at the extent of preparation, Mel Bakersfeld would remind them that removing snow from the airport's operating area was equal to clearing 700 miles of highway. Like the snow desk in the control tower, the maintenance snow center was activated for its winter function only. It was a big, cavernous room above an airport truck garage, and when in use, was presided over by a dispatcher. Judging from the present radio voice, Mel guessed that the regular dispatcher had been relieved for the time being, perhaps for some sleep in the Blue Room, as airport standing orders, with a trace of humor, called the snow crew's bunkhouse. The maintenance foreman's voice came on the radio phone again. "We're worried about that truck too, Danny. The poor bastard of a driver could freeze out there. Though if he has any gumption, he isn't starving." The UAL food truck had left the airline flight kitchen for the main terminal nearly 2 hours ago. Its route lay around the perimeter track, a journey which usually took 15 minutes. But the truck had failed to arrive, and obviously the driver had lost his way and was snowbound somewhere in the airport boondocks. United Flight Dispatch had first sent out its own search party without success. Now airport management had taken over. Mel said, "That United flight finally took off, didn't it? Without food?" Danny Farrow answered without looking up. "I heard the captain put it to the passengers. Told them it had taken an hour to get another truck, that they had a movie and liquor aboard, and the sun was shining in California. Everybody voted to get the hell out. I would too." Mel nodded, resisting a temptation to take over and direct the search himself for the missing truck and driver. Action would be a therapy. The cold of several days, the dampness with it, had made Mel's old war injury ache again, a reminder of Korea which never left him, and he could feel it now. He shifted, leaning, letting the good foot take his weight. The relief was momentary. Almost at once in the new position, the ache resumed. He was glad a moment later that he had not interfered. Danny was already doing the right thing, intensifying the truck search, pulling plows and men from the terminal area and directing them to the perimeter road. For the time being, the parking lots would have to be abandoned, and later there would be plenty of beefs about that. But the missing driver must be saved first. Between calls, Danny warned Mel, "Brace yourself for more complaints. This search'll block the perimeter road. We'll hold up all the other food trucks till we find the guy." Mel nodded. Complaints were a stock-in-trade of an airport manager's job. In this case, as Danny predicted, there would be a flood of protests when other airlines realized their food trucks were not getting through, whatever the reason. There were some who would find it hard to believe that a man could be in peril of death from exposure at a center of civilization like an airport, but it could happen just the same. The lonelier limits of the airport were no place to wander without bearings on a night like this. And if the driver decided to stay with his truck and keep the motor running for warmth, it could quickly be covered by drifts, with deadly carbon monoxide accumulating beneath.